I still remember the day everything changed. I was lying in a hospital bed, my body frail and trembling from the illness that had taken over my life. The sterile smell of disinfectant hung in the air, mixing with the faint scent of flowers someone had left by the window. My mind was foggy, my body weak, and all I wanted was some peace. A quiet moment to breathe without fear. Little did I know that peace was something I would never get back. It started with a phone call that I should have never answered. My daughter's voice was bright, bubbly, the kind of voice I had always loved. But that day it sounded different, eager, almost frantic, like someone who had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to act. "Mom, I need to ask you something important," she said. I tried to sit up, my voice hoarse. "What is it, sweetheart?" Her words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I need to sell the house." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "Sell the house?" I whispered, my voice cracking. My mind raced. This was the home I had built, brick by brick, room by room. This house held decades of memories, my laughter, my tears, my late husband's voice still echoing in the hallways, and the first steps of my children across the creaking wooden floors. "Yes, Mom, just for a while. I really need it," she said. There was a pause, a hesitation, then the words that would haunt me forever. "It's for my wedding dress." I laughed nervously at first, thinking maybe I didn't hear her right. "Your wedding dress?" "Yes, Mom. The one I've been dreaming about my whole life," she said, her voice dripping with desperation and excitement. "It's expensive, but I've found the one. I just can't wait any longer. I've already contacted the agent." My chest tightened. Every organ in my body seemed to shrink in horror. "You what?" "I sold it, Mom. The house. It's done. Don't be mad," she said, almost cheerfully, like she had done nothing wrong. I remember staring at the phone, my knuckles white, as the world blurred around me. The hospital bed, the floor line, the machines beeping. They all became distant noise. My mind was screaming, but no sound came out. How could she? How could my own daughter, the girl I had nurtured since she was a baby, do this to me? But the worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the calm, almost prideful way she said it. She didn't sound guilty. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded like she had just accomplished something monumental. When I finally found my voice, it was barely a whisper. Where will I go?" "Oh, don't worry about that, Mom. I'll take care of it. I know someone who can put you up temporarily. It'll be fine." Her tone was soothing, almost patronizing, like I was some fragile object that needed coddling instead of a human being who had just been robbed of her sanctuary. And that was when I realized the full weight of it. She hadn't just sold a house. She had sold my history, my memories, my security. Everything I had built for decades had been stripped away while I was too weak to even fight back. The days that followed were a haze. Nurses would bring me meals, doctors would discuss my recovery, and every time my daughter visited, she'd flash a dazzling smile and try to act like nothing had happened. But I couldn't forgive her, not yet. I couldn't comprehend how a daughter I had raised with love, care, and sacrifice could choose a dress over her own mother. I began to notice things, little signs I had ignored before. The sudden secrecy around her phone, the excited whispers to her friends when she thought I wasn't listening, the hurried trips to appointments she never took me along to. It all clicked into place. The wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was a project, a mission, and I was just collateral damage in her pursuit of perfection. I tried to reason with her. "Honey, the house, that's our home. That's my life. You can't just..." But she interrupted me mid-sentence. "Mom, it's for a day. One day. Don't be dramatic. You'll be fine. I promise," she said, her tone almost mocking. And that's when I realized. She had already made her choice. My presence, my feelings, my very existence didn't matter. Her dream was all that mattered. By the time the day of the wedding came, I knew I wasn't invited. There was a cruel irony in that. She had taken everything from me, yet still assumed I'd quietly exist in the background, invisible, as if my heartache was some minor inconvenience. But I didn't want to be invisible. I wanted to confront her, to make her see the monster she had become, even for just a moment. So I went. I walked into the hall, dressed in my hospital-issued cardigan and shoes that had seen better days. The music was swelling, the laughter was loud, and there she was, my daughter, radiant, glowing, perfect in the gown that had cost more than the house I had lived in for decades. And in that moment, standing at the edge of the crowd, I realized something horrifying. I was an uninvited guest at my own daughter's celebration, a stranger in the story of her life, the very mother who had given her everything. The wedding hall gleamed with extravagance, every corner meticulously decorated, as if it were pulled straight out of a fairy tale magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting golden light onto polished marble floors. Rows of chairs lined the aisle, each adorned with delicate ribbons and flowers. Guests whispered excitedly, snapping photos and exchanging compliments, but to me, all of it felt surreal, almost grotesque. This was supposed to be my daughter's day of joy, but in truth, it was a monument to her selfishness. I lingered near the entrance, pretending to be just another guest who had somehow wandered in. The air was thick with the sweet scent of roses and lilies, but it carried a bitter sting for me, a constant reminder that she had taken everything from me for this day. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, grief, disbelief, and an aching, unfulfilled love all collided at once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up to her and shake some sense into her to demand, "Do you even remember who I am?" But the hall was filled with strangers, friends, distant relatives, people who wouldn't understand. And I realized with a sinking feeling that no one here could help me. No one could undo what had been done. She appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant beyond words. The dress she had dreamed of for years fit her perfectly, every fold and shimmer reflecting the painstaking efforts she had gone through to make this moment hers. She held her head high, smiling at the crowd, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I wanted to look away, to shield myself from the sight of her joy, but I couldn't. Every step she took down that aisle was a dagger to my heart. I watched as the officiant began speaking, his voice warm and welcoming. I tried to focus on the ceremony, to find some glimmer of happiness for my daughter, but it was impossible. Every vow she recited, every promise of love, every smile she shared with her husband was a reminder that she had chosen her dreams over me. The house, my sanctuary, my memories, they were all gone. And here she was, laughing, celebrating, as if nothing mattered but her perfect day. At one point our eyes met. I caught her glance, the one moment she looked in my direction, and I saw a flicker of recognition, or perhaps it was guilt. She quickly looked away, focusing on the vows again. That brief moment was enough. My heart ached with the knowledge that she knew what she had done. Deep down, she must have known the magnitude of her betrayal. And yet, she continued, as though the pain she inflicted was inconsequential. I drifted to the side, keeping my distance. I didn't want to interrupt, but I couldn't simply vanish either. I needed to see her, to feel the weight of reality pressing down on her perfect fantasy. She had planned every detail with precision. The flowers, the music, the cake, the photographers, the guests. And all of it was funded by a choice that had left me homeless, confused, and heartbroken. The ceremony ended and applause filled the room. People cheered and clapped for her, praising her beauty, her grace, her vision. I wanted to cheer too, but all I could feel was emptiness. Every clap echoed like a reminder of what had been stolen. I wanted to scream, to tell the guests that the most important person in her life had been betrayed, but I remained silent. Later, during the reception, I stood near the buffet, my hands clutching a glass of water that I didn't even want to drink. I watched as my daughter danced with her husband, the smile on her face radiant, almost blinding. Every laugh, every step, every joyful twirl tore at me. I had raised her, nurtured her, sacrificed my time, my comfort, my security, and yet here I was, invisible, unacknowledged, a ghost at her own celebration. A few distant relatives approached me, asking if I was all right. I forced a smile, nodding silently. "I'm fine," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "Just enjoying the day." They didn't know the truth. They couldn't know the truth. And even if they did, what could anyone say? Nothing could undo the betrayal. Nothing could restore the home that had been taken from me. As the night progressed, I found myself wandering outside, seeking solace in the quiet night air. The cool breeze brushed against my face, carrying faint laughter and music from inside. I sank onto a bench, my body finally surrendering to exhaustion. My mind replayed every memory of that house, the mornings filled with sunlight, the dinners around the table, the birthdays, the Christmas mornings. Every brick, every corner, every small detail of that home was now someone else's reality, used to fund a single day of opulence. And yet, amidst the grief, a flicker of resolve began to grow inside me. I realized that this wasn't just about loss, it was about strength. She had taken everything tangible from me. Yes, but she couldn't take my voice, my dignity, or the truth of what had happened. I made a silent vow then. I would confront her. I would make her see the consequences of her choices. She couldn't erase the past, and I wouldn't let her erase my presence in her life entirely. I returned inside for the final moments of the celebration, my steps slow but determined. The laughter continued, the music swelled, and my daughter's joy was palpable. But this time I was no longer invisible. I moved closer, positioning myself where she could see me clearly. When our eyes met again, I didn't look away. There was no fear, no pleading, just a quiet, undeniable truth in my gaze, that I knew everything and that nothing could erase the betrayal she had committed. For the first time that night, I felt a strange sense of power, not over her, not in a vindictive way, but in the knowledge that I remained despite everything. I had survived. I had witnessed, and she could not take that from me. The morning after the wedding, the house that had once been mine felt like a distant memory. I was temporarily staying with a distant cousin, in a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old perfume. It wasn't home. It wasn't even close. Every item in that borrowed space reminded me of what had been lost. The familiar creak of the stairs, the sunlight falling across the living room floor, the way the kitchen smelled when I baked cookies. None of it existed anymore. The house that had been my world, my sanctuary, had been replaced by a dream built for someone else. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind replayed the events of the wedding endlessly. Her laughter, her radiant smile, the way she clutched her husband's hand as if nothing in the world mattered except her own happiness. I tried to convince myself that I should be happy for her, that this was her moment, her dream realized, but the pain was too raw, too deep. This wasn't just disappointment. This was betrayal on a scale I hadn't imagined possible. By mid-morning, I decided I could no longer remain passive. I needed answers. I needed her to acknowledge what she had done, to feel even a fraction of the turmoil she had caused. I called her, my voice tight but steady, trying to mask the storm raging inside me. "Mom," she answered cheerfully, as if the wedding had erased the memory of everything that had happened. "We need to talk," I said simply. Her voice faltered just slightly. "Oh, about what?" she asked, pretending ignorance. "About the house. About what you did," I said, my words carefully measured. "I need to understand why you thought it was okay to sell my home while I was in the hospital." There was a long pause. I could hear her breath, shallow and uneasy. Finally she spoke. "Mom, it wasn't like that. I needed it for my wedding. I thought you'd understand." "Understand?" I almost laughed through my tears. "Understand that you destroyed everything I worked for? That you left me without a place to live? Do you even hear yourself?" I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice wavering slightly. I thought you'd be okay. Everyone told me it would be fine. I thought." Her words trailed off, lost in uncertainty. But I knew better. I had raised her. I knew the way she thought, the way she planned, the way she justified her actions. This wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness. This was deliberate. She had wanted something badly enough to strip me of my security, my memories, and my peace. I couldn't contain myself anymore. I stormed over to her apartment, every step fueled by the mixture of grief and anger coursing through my veins. When she opened the door, dressed still in remnants of her wedding celebration, radiant but unsuspecting, I felt a surge of emotion I could barely control. "We need to talk. Now," I said, my voice cold, heavy with the weight of years of care and sacrifice. She stepped aside silently, letting me in. I looked around, noting every detail of the apartment she had moved into. Expensive furniture, expensive decor, everything a testament to the resources she had drained from my former home. Every piece was a symbol of what she had taken from me, and it made my blood boil. "I can't believe you did this," I said, pacing the living room. "Do you even realize what it means to take someone's home? Their memories? Their sense of security?" She avoided my gaze, fiddling with a bracelet on her wrist. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry," I shouted, my voice echoing against the walls. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back decades of memories. Sorry doesn't replace the life I had built. Tears streamed down her face then, genuine or performative, I couldn't tell. I didn't know how else to pay for the dress. I didn't want to ask anyone else. I thought it was okay, she said, her voice trembling. I stopped pacing for a moment, staring at her. It was never okay. Never. You chose a dress over your own mother. Over me. Do you even understand the betrayal? The magnitude of it? Her shoulders slumped. I just wanted my wedding to be perfect. I didn't think. You didn't think. I repeated, my voice cracking. You didn't think about me? About how I would survive this? How I would feel, knowing that my daughter, the girl I raised, valued a dress more than me? You didn't think at all. The room fell silent, heavy with words unsaid and emotions too vast to contain. For the first time she looked up at me, truly looked. Her eyes, wide and scared, finally reflected the understanding I had been craving. But it was fleeting. She blinked, turned away, and the fragile connection was gone. Days turned into weeks, and the aftermath of the wedding only deepened the chasm between us. Family members whispered behind my back, divided in their loyalties. Some tried to console me, some tried to justify her actions, and some, the ones closest to her, outright encouraged her. It felt like the world was conspiring against me, and I was left alone in my grief, clutching memories that no longer had a home. Even in her presence, I felt invisible, a ghost haunting the life she had stolen. Every conversation was a test of endurance. Every smile she offered felt like mockery. And yet, through it all, a part of me refused to break. I would not let her erase me from my own story. I would confront her, again and again if necessary, until she realized the consequences of her choices. One evening, after yet another heated argument, I sat by the window of my cousin's apartment, staring at the city lights below. The glow of the buildings, the hum of cars, the distant laughter of people celebrating their own lives. It was a cruel reminder of what had been taken from me. But as the night deepened, I felt a strange clarity. This wasn't just about anger or grief. This was about truth. This was about justice in its simplest form. She had taken something sacred from me, and she needed to face it. Not through revenge, not through malice, but through the undeniable truth of what she had done. And so I began to plan. Not schemes, not plots, not public confrontations, but a confrontation that would be impossible to ignore. A conversation, a reckoning where she could no longer hide behind excuses, where she could no longer pretend that her choices were harmless. She needed to see, to feel, to understand that her pursuit of perfection had consequences. Real, tangible, irreversible consequences. It was a week after the wedding when I finally decided I could no longer wait. My patience had worn thin. My grief had solidified into a kind of quiet rage, and I knew that if I didn't confront her now, I might never find closure. I arrived at her new apartment unannounced, determined that she would face the truth, even if it was painful. The door opened and there she was, still glowing from the post-wedding euphoria, still dressed in delicate silk, her hair perfectly styled. But this time she didn't smile. Something in my eyes told her that this wasn't about pleasantries, about polite conversation, or about post-wedding greetings. This was something far heavier. "Mom," she said cautiously, her voice small, uncertain. "Don't mom me," I said, stepping into the apartment, my gaze unwavering. "We need to talk, and I need you to listen. No excuses. No lies. No pretending." Her face fell. I'm listening," she whispered, almost like a child facing a parent she has wronged. "Do you even understand what you did?" I asked, my voice steady but searing. "Do you understand that you sold the home I lived in for decades, the house that held every memory of our family, the very place where your life began, just to buy a dress?" Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. I thought it was worth it," she said, her voice faltering. "Worth it?" I echoed, incredulous. "A single dress, a single day of perfection worth wiping out my life? Worth taking away my sense of security, my peace, my memories? Do you even hear yourself?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, and for a brief moment, I saw fear and guilt flicker in her eyes. But it was fleeting. She blinked, swallowed hard, and tried to explain. "I didn't think it would hurt you this much. Everyone said it would be fine, and I just wanted my wedding to be perfect. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I shouted, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and fury. You didn't mean to destroy me? My home? My life? How could you be so selfish, so blind, so careless? You thought about your dreams, your happiness, your dress, but did you even think about me? Her eyes dropped to the floor, guilt etched into every line of her face. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't want to seem greedy or selfish. I thought this was the only way. The only way? I said, incredulity lacing every word. The only way was to take everything from me? To make me powerless, voiceless, invisible in my own life. My chest tightened as tears blurred my vision. You were supposed to be my daughter. My child. Not the person who would trample over my life for a gown. She flinched at my words, as if the pain in them struck her physically. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered again. I really am. I didn't realize. But I cut her off. You realized perfectly. You realized and you chose anyway. That is what makes this unforgivable. That is what makes me question everything. How could I have raised someone capable of this? The apartment was silent for a long moment, broken only by the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. I could see her trembling, her eyes wide, her entire body rigid with fear and shame. And for the first time I sensed the beginning of understanding. She had been shielded by her own excitement, her own desire, her own illusions, but now, faced with the raw, unfiltered pain of her actions, that shield was cracking. I never wanted to hurt you like this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought I was doing something good for me, for us, for my wedding. Good. I scoffed bitterly. Do you think good can exist in betrayal? Do you think that stealing your mother's home, her memories, her peace, and then smiling as if the world belongs to you is good? Her head dropped and she sobbed quietly, the weight of realization finally pressing down on her. I didn't think it through, she admitted. I didn't see it. I didn't realize what I was doing to you. You didn't think it through? I repeated, my voice trembling with fury and grief combined. Do you understand that this is my life you destroyed? That every memory, every step, every laugh in that house is gone because of your desire for perfection? She looked up, eyes red and puffy, tears still streaming. I see it now, she whispered. I see it, Mom. I really do. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, my anger mingling with the fragile thread of maternal love that still existed. You can't fix the house. You can't bring back what was lost. But you can start by understanding the depth of your actions. You can start by acknowledging that your dreams don't come at the expense of someone else's life. She nodded silently, unable to speak, the enormity of her actions finally sinking in. It was a long, agonizing silence, filled with grief, regret, and the unspoken question of whether our relationship could survive this betrayal. And in that silence I realized something. My anger, my grief, my heartbreak, it wasn't just for the house. It was for the trust that had been shattered, the bond between mother and daughter that had been broken in a single selfish act. That bond would never be the same. But acknowledging the betrayal, confronting it head-on, was the first step toward clarity. For hours we sat there in tense silence. I could see the lines of guilt etching themselves deeper into her face. I could feel the tremors of fear in her hands. And I could sense for the first time a flicker of understanding. She was beginning to grasp that life is not just about fulfilling desires, but about responsibility, empathy, and respect for those who love you. By the time I left that night, I didn't feel victory and I didn't feel peace. I felt something more profound, awareness. She had seen the pain she caused, and I had voiced my anguish. The battle was not over, and the healing would be long, but for the first time, the walls of denial had begun to crumble. The days after our confrontation were some of the hardest I have ever faced. The house, the very symbol of my life, my sacrifices, and my memories, was gone, replaced in her mind by the shimmer of silk and the laughter of her wedding day. But for me, it wasn't just the house. It was the betrayal. The realization that someone I had loved more than life itself could choose a momentary fantasy over me. Family members tried to intervene, some taking sides, others simply pretending nothing had happened. My siblings, cautious and protective, urged patience. Give her time, they said. She's young. She doesn't know what she's done. But how do you forgive a crime so intimate, so personal? How do you look at the person who stole not money or jewels, but your life, your sense of safety, and simply say, "Time will fix it"? I found myself walking alone through the streets I had known for decades. The city moved on as though nothing had changed, indifferent to my grief. I passed by parks where I had taken her as a child, markets where we had shopped together, streets where I had carried her when she was too small to walk. Each place whispered memories I could no longer revisit in my own home. I felt like a ghost haunting the life I had lost, powerless and unseen. She tried calling. She sent texts. She appeared at family gatherings, attempting awkwardly to bridge the gap she had created. But every interaction was a reminder of the betrayal, a mirror reflecting how far she had strayed from the child I had raised. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the discomfort in her posture, but it wasn't enough. It was like putting a bandage on a wound that ran through the very foundation of my life. At first, I wanted nothing more than to lash out, to scream, to make her feel the anguish she had caused. I imagined confronting her in front of everyone, laying bare every stolen memory, every shattered moment, every tear I had cried in silence. But I realized that public humiliation wouldn't heal me. It would only deepen the divide, cement her in defensiveness and resentment. I needed something more profound than anger. I needed truth. One evening, I sat down and began to write a letter, though I had no intention of sending it immediately. I wrote about every memory of that house, every moment we had shared within its walls, every instance of love, care, and sacrifice. I wrote about the day she was born, how I had cradled her tiny body and whispered promises I had intended to keep. I wrote about the betrayal, the heartbreak, the nights I had lain awake wondering how the person I loved most could cause such devastation. As I wrote, something shifted. The act of pouring out my thoughts, my grief, my anger, gave me a strange kind of clarity. I realized that my pain was mine and no one, not even my daughter, could erase it. I realized that while she had taken the house, she had not taken my memories, my resilience, my voice. And most importantly, she had not taken the lessons of love and sacrifice I had taught her. Whether she realized it or not, those lessons were still embedded in her, waiting for the moment she could understand them fully. Weeks turned into months. My relationship with her remained fractured, but the intensity of my anger began to soften, replaced by a cautious wariness. I watched her from a distance, noting how the consequences of her actions began to touch her life in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. She faced financial struggles from overspending on the wedding, social tensions with friends who had witnessed the drama, and the quiet judgment of relatives who had been aware of her actions. Life, in its own unrelenting way, began to teach her what my words could not. Yet even as I observed her struggles, my own journey continued. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, in borrowed apartments, in temporary homes, in quiet moments where I could reflect on what mattered most. I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed, a strength forged in the fires of betrayal and loss. I began to realize that while she had taken my house, she could not take my identity, my dignity, or my capacity to love despite everything. There were moments of temptation, moments when I wanted to reach out and strike back, to reclaim what was mine by force or confrontation. But I resisted. I realized that true power lay not in retaliation, but in endurance, in witnessing the consequences of her actions without succumbing to hatred, in standing tall despite the devastation she had wrought. One day she came to me tentative, unsure. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Mom," she said softly, I want to make things right. I don't know how, but I want to try." I looked at her for a long time, the memories of the house flashing before my eyes, the laughter, the tears, the love, and I realized that this was a crossroads. I could continue to hold on to anger, to let the betrayal define our relationship forever. Or I could acknowledge her remorse, however delayed, and decide whether a path forward was possible. "I don't know if things can ever be the same," I said finally, my voice steady but filled with the weight of experience. "What you did changed everything. You took something from me that can never be replaced. But I see that you understand now, and that matters. It matters more than you realize." Her shoulders sagged in relief and tears filled her eyes. I will do whatever it takes to make amends," she said. "I don't need grand gestures or expensive gifts," I said. "I need honesty. I need respect. I need acknowledgement of the pain you caused and the responsibility you have for your choices. And in that moment, a fragile truce began to form. It was not forgiveness, it was not reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement of reality. She had taken much from me, but she had not taken my strength. I had survived, I had endured, and in doing so, I had begun to define the terms on which we could move forward. Life would continue to test us, and our relationship would always carry the scars of that betrayal. But through the pain, through the heartbreak, through the loss, I discovered a truth. That even in the darkest moments, resilience and self-respect could shine brighter than any betrayal, stronger than any wound. And as I looked at her, remorseful and humbled, I realized that while our lives had been irrevocably altered, the possibility for understanding, for growth, and for cautious rebuilding remained. Time had a strange way of moving in the months after that confrontation. Some days it felt slow, dragging endlessly as I wrestled with the ghosts of memories my daughter had taken from me. Other days it moved too quickly, sweeping past moments I wanted to hold on to, leaving only emptiness where life had once been vivid and familiar. Every decision, every word, every interaction was layered with the weight of what had happened. The house, the betrayal, the wedding, and the raw wound it left in my heart. She tried. I could see it. Not perfectly, not immediately, but in small gestures. She stopped overstepping boundaries, she began to listen more carefully, she started asking questions not about her convenience, but about my feelings, my thoughts, my well-being. She hadn't fully earned forgiveness, and I was careful not to give it freely, but there was a shift. The first cracks in her shield of selfishness were appearing, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable to a mother who had watched every nuance of her child's behavior. One evening, she came to me with an apology that went beyond words. It wasn't a simple "I'm sorry" thrown out in passing. She had written a letter, painstakingly long, detailing the awareness she had gained, the lessons she had learned, and the remorse she carried. She admitted the choices she had made, not to excuse herself, but to own them fully. Reading it, I felt a storm of emotions. Anger, grief, relief, and a tentative hope. "Mom," she said when she handed me the letter, her voice shaking slightly, "I can't take back what I did. I can't bring the house back, I can't replace the memories. But I want to start making amends. I want to rebuild what I broke step by step if you'll let me." I took a deep breath, staring at her, studying the face that had once been my everything. She looked smaller now, humbled by the enormity of her actions. I could see the weight she carried, the guilt pressing down on her like a tangible force. And for the first time in months, I allowed a small flicker of something I hadn't felt since the betrayal possibility. "Step by step," I said slowly. "That's all I can ask for. But understand this, trust isn't rebuilt overnight. Forgiveness isn't a gift you receive because you say the right words. It's earned through consistency, awareness, and respect." She nodded solemnly, tears welling up. "I understand, Mom. I will do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, she made changes. She involved me in decisions, sought my opinion, and demonstrated patience and humility. The transition wasn't easy. Every old memory, every reminder of the house, every glance at pictures of the home we had once shared, threatened to undo the fragile progress we were making. But slowly, carefully, the conversations began to shift from accusation to dialogue, from blame to understanding. Family gatherings were particularly challenging. Relatives who had previously sided with her now watched cautiously, unsure of how our fractured relationship would unfold. Some whispered, some offered tentative support, but I no longer sought validation from them. The rebuilding of trust had to be between us alone. There were setbacks. Moments when anger flared unexpectedly, when a careless word or gesture reminded me of the betrayal and made my heart clench painfully. She stumbled too. Old patterns of entitlement and self-centeredness resurfaced, though fleetingly. Each time we had to pause, confront the issue, and recommit to honesty. It was exhausting, it was painful, but it was real. I began to reflect more deeply on what had happened. The betrayal of the house wasn't just about material loss. It was about the fragility of trust, the weight of expectations, and the deep scars that selfish choices leave in relationships. I realized that while anger and grief were natural, they could not define me indefinitely. I had to reclaim my sense of self, my dignity, and my emotional autonomy. I had to separate my identity from the loss inflicted upon me. Through this process, I discovered a surprising strength. the ability to endure immense pain without breaking, the capacity to confront betrayal without giving in to vengeance, and the resilience to begin rebuilding a relationship that had been nearly destroyed. These were gifts I had nurtured within myself, born of suffering and tempered by reflection. Months turned into a year. My daughter and I were not fully healed, and perhaps we never would be entirely. But the relationship that had been fractured, nearly destroyed, had begun to take shape again, different, cautious, scarred, but real. We learned to navigate boundaries, to speak with honesty, to listen with empathy, and to acknowledge the consequences of actions without hiding behind excuses. One afternoon, as we sat together in a quiet cafe, she reached across the table and held my hand. "Mom," she said softly, "I know I can never undo what I did. I know I can't replace the house or the memories, but I want you to know I've learned. I've truly learned what matters, and I will never take that for granted again." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman she had become. Not perfect, not unblemished, but aware, humble, and willing to grow. I felt a mixture of relief, lingering pain, and cautious hope. I squeezed her hand gently. "I know," I said. "And that's the start. It's all we have right now, the start. The rest we'll see together." In the quiet that followed, I realized that life would always carry the echoes of what had been lost. The house, my sanctuary, my memories, those were gone. But the strength I had found, the lessons she had begun to understand, and the fragile rebuilding of trust were now my reality. We had survived betrayal. We had endured heartbreak. And in that endurance we had found the possibility of something new, something cautious, something real. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was honest and it was ours. And after everything, that mattered more than any house, any dress, or any fleeting moment of happiness.